He showed up to her mother's retirement party with another woman on his arm, champagne in hand, laughing at something she said. While Lena Whitmore stood at the entrance of the Whitmore family home, holding a tray of canapes she had spent 3 hours preparing, and the room went very, very quiet. He did not notice the quiet. Men like Garrett Voss never do. What Garrett did not know, what no one in that room knew except Lena and the family attorney standing near the fireplace, with a glass of sparkling water and a face that gave away nothing, was that the Whitmore estate had already been restructured. The accounts had already been moved. The trust had already been sealed. Garrett Voss had spent 4 years married to Lena Whitmore, believing she was the administrative arm of his life, the woman who scheduled and managed and coordinated and smiled. He'd spent the last 6 months planning to leave her for a woman named Cassidy Finn. He had spent the last 3 weeks consulting a divorce attorney about how to access the Whitmore family assets before Lena could protect them. He was 4 years too late. He simply hadn't been told. Lena set the tray on the credenza. She smoothed her dress. She walked toward her mother across the room with the composure of someone who had been practicing exactly this moment for longer than anyone realized. That was the night everything ended for Garrett Voss, and the night everything began for Lena Whitmore. He just didn't know it yet. Chapter 1. The Daughter Who Listened. Her name was Lena Whitmore, and she had been listening carefully to the world since she was 7 years old. And her mother, June Whitmore, brought her to the Whitmore logistics offices on a Saturday afternoon and said, "Watch how people act when they think no one important is watching." Lena had watched. She watched the junior accountant, who straightened his tie when the door opened and slouched the moment it closed. She watched the receptionist, who spoke differently on the phone, depending on whether the caller had a title or not. She watched her mother move through the building with the unhurried authority of a woman who had built something real. And she understood, even at 7, that the building moved around her mother rather than the other way around. June Whitmore had spent 32 years building Whitmore Logistics, from a regional freight coordination company into a national operation with contracts across 14 states. She had done it quietly. No magazine profiles, no speaking circuit, no press releases unless legally required. She believed, and had said so to Lena precisely once in a way that required no repetition, that the loudest person in a room is almost never the most powerful one. They are simply the most anxious. Lena grew up understanding this the way other children understood gravity. Not as a lesson, but as a condition of existence. She was 34 when she met Garrett Voss at a professional conference in Chicago. She was attending on behalf of her mother's foundation. He was there representing a supply chain consulting firm, with a client roster he mentioned within the first 4 minutes of conversation. He was the kind of handsome that photographs, well broad-shouldered, good jaw, the kind of smile that had probably gotten him out of things it shouldn't have. He was confident in the particular way of someone who had never been seriously wrong about something that cost him. Lena recognized the type. She had grown up watching her mother sort people into those who built things and those who positioned themselves near things other people built. Garrett was the second kind, but he was also genuinely warm in those first months, and she was 34 and tired of the performance of caution, and her mother's voice in her head was, for once, not loud enough. She married him 11 months later. Her mother came to the wedding and said nothing negative about Garrett directly, which was itself a kind of statement. She simply hugged Lena at the reception and said, "You know where I am." Lena carried that sentence for 4 years. The marriage had its own logic. Garrett was charming at dinner parties. He was competent at enough of his job to maintain credibility. He made her laugh in the early years, genuinely the kind of laugh that surprised her. But he was also. She began to notice within 18 months a man who moved through life by borrowing other people's structures. He borrowed her social ease at gatherings where he knew no one. He borrowed her organizational precision when it came to anything involving paperwork or planning. He borrowed the credibility that came from being associated with the Whitmore name, without ever asking what the name meant or what had been required to build it. He never asked what she did when he was at work. He never asked how the house ran, or what the accounts looked like, or what it cost to maintain the life he came home to every evening, and received as though it had simply generated itself. He accepted the infrastructure, the way certain guests accept hospitality, completely, without acknowledgement, as though it is the natural order of things rather than the effort of a specific person. Lena's mother noticed this during one of her visits. She sat at Lena's kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and said nothing for a long moment after Garrett left the room. Then she said, "A man who never asks what things cost has already decided he doesn't have to pay." Lena said nothing. She refilled her mother's coffee. She stored the observation in the part of her mind where she kept the things that were too accurate to argue with. Chapter 2. The Other Woman. She found out about Cassidy Fenn the way she found out about most things. Not by looking, but by paying attention to what was already there. It was a Tuesday. Lena was reviewing the household credit card statement. Something she did on the first Tuesday of every month, with the same methodical focus she applied to everything. There was a charge she didn't recognize. A florist on the north side of the city. $64. Dated on a day when Garrett had told her he had a client dinner. She looked at it for approximately 10 seconds. She set the statement down. She made tea. She went to her desk. She did not confront Garrett. She had watched her mother conduct due diligence her entire life. She understood that the worst thing you could do with incomplete information was act on it before it was complete. So she waited. She paid attention. She assembled. Over the following 8 weeks, she built a file. The florist charge was followed by a hotel reservation, a restaurant on a street where Garrett had no clients, a gift purchase at a jewelry store, on a day he told her he was in Milwaukee. She cross-referenced the calendar discrepancies. She found a pattern with the consistency of someone who had stopped being careful because he no longer considered it necessary. The woman was Cassidy Fenn, 31. Event coordinator at a hospitality company downtown. She had a public social media presence that Lena examined with the detached focus of a researcher rather than a wife. And what she found was a woman who was neither cruel nor particularly aware of what she had positioned herself inside. Cassidy Fenn was attracted to a version of Garrett that Garrett performed for her, and Lena recognized the performance because she had once believed it herself. The affair had been running approximately 5 months when Lena confirmed it. By the time she was finished documenting, it was closer to 7. She called her mother on a Friday evening. She said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without responding until I'm finished." June Whitmore listened. She did not interrupt once. When Lena finished, there was a silence of about 4 seconds. Then June said, "I know." Lena closed her eyes. "How long?" "About 6 weeks. My security team flagged activity near the household accounts during a routine audit. I didn't tell you because the information wasn't complete and because you needed to arrive at your own understanding. How do you feel?" Lena considered the question. "I feel like a load-bearing wall just found out it was load-bearing." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "That's accurate. And now? Now I want to know what to do." "You know what to do," June said. "You've watched me do it your entire life. You document everything and you change nothing on the surface, and you let him believe the world is exactly as he arranged it. And then you call Howard." Howard Marsh was the Whitmore family attorney. He had been handling the Whitmore estate for 19 years. He had a face like a closed file cabinet and spoke in the measured cadence of a man who chose every word the way a surgeon chooses an instrument. Lena called Howard on a Saturday morning. Chapter 3. What June Built. June Whitmore had begun restructuring the family estate 2 years before the wedding. Not because she had known about Garrett specifically, but because she had understood the type. And because she had spent 3 decades watching what happened to family assets when a marriage introduced an unknown variable into a structure that had been built to last. She called it protective architecture. The principle was simple. Everything that belonged to the Whitmores should remain belonging to the Whitmores, in a form that was legally unambiguous and structurally inaccessible to anyone who arrived through marriage rather than through blood or demonstrated commitment. The primary assets, the logistics company, the commercial property holdings, the investment accounts, the family home in Evanston, where June had lived for 26 years, had been held in a family trust since Lena was 19. When Lena married Garrett, none of those assets changed structure. His name did not appear on any title, any account, any beneficiary designation connected to the core holdings. The house Lena and Garrett lived in was owned by a subsidiary of the trust. The accounts Garrett had access to were a narrow operational layer, sufficient to support their lifestyle, without exposing anything foundational. Garrett had never asked why his name wasn't on the mortgage. He had never asked why the household accounts had a ceiling. He had never asked where the money came from that kept the ceiling comfortable. He had accepted the life the way a man accepts a seat on a plane, grateful for the comfort, incurious about the engineering. When Lena called Howard and told him about the affair and the documentation, Howard said, "Good. How complete is the file? Complete enough, Lena said. Complete enough is not complete enough. I need everything. She sent him everything. Howard reviewed the file over a weekend. On Monday morning, he called her back and said, "Your husband has been consulting with a family law attorney named Raymond Dells. Dells specializes in high-asset divorce. Your husband has had 3 consultations in the past 6 weeks. In those consultations, based on what Dells would have told him given the assets he disclosed, Garrett believes he has a claim on approximately 40% of what he thinks you own." "What does he think I own?" Howard paused. "He thinks you are a woman of comfortable means, whose mother runs a successful regional logistics company. He does not know the company's valuation. He does not know the trust structure. He does not know about the commercial holdings. How much does he think I'm worth? Based on what he would have disclosed to Dells, approximately 2 to 3 million. And what am I actually worth?" Howard was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "The trust's primary holdings, conservatively valued as of last quarter, are approximately $180 million. The commercial portfolio adds another 40. The company itself, at current market, is approximately $260 million. We're discussing a family estate in the range of $480 million. Sat with that number for a moment. She had grown up inside it the way you grow up inside weather, aware of it, shaped by it, but not often stopping to measure it. "He has no idea," she said. "None," Howard confirmed. "And we have every intention of keeping it that way until the appropriate moment." "When is the appropriate moment?" "When he makes his move. He will. He's already in motion. Let him build his case against a version of you that doesn't exist. Then we show him who he's actually been sitting across from." Chapter 4. The Retirement Party. June Whitmore's retirement party was held on a Saturday in September, at the family home in Evanston. 200 guests, business partners, longtime clients, employees who had been with the company for decades, the quiet and substantial people who had built careers alongside June and understood exactly what it had taken. Lena had organized everything: the catering, the florals, the program, the guest flow. She had done it the way she did everything. Methodically, without announcement in the hours before anyone else was paying attention. She spent that morning on the phone with the florist and the sound system vendor and the caterer's logistics coordinator. She had driven to Evanston early to walk through the setup and correct the 6 things that were wrong. By the time the guests arrived, the house looked effortless. That was always the point. Garrett arrived separately. He had told Lena he would meet her there. This had not surprised her. He had been arriving separately to things for the past 4 months. What surprised no one who had been paying attention, and stunned everyone who hadn't, was that Garrett arrived with Cassidy Finn. She was wearing a green dress. She was holding his hand. She walked into June Whitmore's retirement party with the expression of a woman who believed she was about to step into a future, rather than a woman who had just stepped into the most precisely laid trap she would never see coming. The room noticed the particular silence of 200 people simultaneously recalibrating, moved through the house like a change in air pressure. Longtime family friends looked at each other. June's business partner of 20 years, a woman named Patricia Donnell, set down her champagne glass very carefully. Lena saw them walk in. She was standing near the entrance, holding a tray she had picked up from the kitchen, because the server assigned to that post had stepped away. She looked at Garrett. She looked at the woman beside him. She looked at the hand-holding, deliberate and public, in her mother's home, at her mother's party, in front of 200 people who had known the Whitmore family for decades. She felt something very still move through her. Not grief, not anger. Something older and more fundamental. The specific sensation of watching a prediction arrive with mechanical precision. She set the tray on the credenza. She turned. She walked toward her mother, who was standing near the window receiving guests, with the composed grace of a woman who had seen everything and been surprised by very little. June looked at Lena. Then she looked across the room at Garrett and Cassidy. Then she looked back at Lena. "Are you all right?" June asked, low. "I'm fine." June studied her daughter's face for a moment. Then she nodded once, slowly, the way she nodded when she reviewed a contract that had been correctly prepared. She said, "Howard is near the fireplace, I know." She turned back to her guests. Lena walked toward Howard. Garrett approached Lena 20 minutes later. He had a glass of wine and the expression of a man who had prepared something and was delivering it. "Lena." He said her name the way he'd been saying it lately, with a slight distance built into it, the sound of a man practicing detachment. "Garrett." She looked at him the way she had looked at everything for the past 8 weeks. steadily, without emotion, the way a surveyor looks at land. "I think we need to talk. Soon. About things." Lena looked at him, then at Cassidy, who was across the room, laughing at something June's deputy CFO had said, then back at Garrett. "I think you're right," she said. Her voice was level, neutral, the voice of a woman who had already had this conversation in her head approximately 40 times and found it less interesting each time. She turned and walked toward the kitchen to check on the appetizer timing. Garrett interpreted this as avoidance. He interpreted her composure as shock. He interpreted her silence as the silence of a woman who did not know what was coming, and was therefore powerless to prepare for it. He had never been more wrong about anything. Chapter 5. The Motion. Garrett filed for divorce 11 days after the retirement party. He did not discuss this with Lena in advance. He simply instructed his attorney to initiate proceedings. His position, as Raymond Dells had prepared it, sought equitable distribution of marital assets, including the family residence, joint accounts, and any assets acquired or substantially increased in value during the marriage. He also did something that Howard Marsh had told Lena to expect. He moved money. Specifically, Garrett transferred $87,000 from the joint savings account into a personal account at a different bank. On the same day he filed the divorce petition, 3 hours before the filing was formally recorded. He had done this believing it was the kind of thing that got lost in the complexity of divorce proceedings. He had done this without knowing that the joint account was monitored in real time, that the transfer had been logged the moment it cleared, and that Howard Marsh had a notation added to the case file before Garrett's attorney had finished transmitting the petition. Lena received the petition on a Tuesday morning. She read it at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the composed attention of someone reviewing a business proposal she already knew the conclusion of. She called Howard. He filed. "I know. He also moved $87,000 from the joint account this morning." Lena set her coffee down. "My father's watch," she said. "It's still in the safe deposit box under the joint account address, already transferred to the estate account last Thursday." She looked out the window. The garden was turning. Late September, the light going golden horizontal. "Howard. Is it enough? What he did with the money? Combined with the prior consultations with Dells, which he did not disclose to you, and the transfer occurring simultaneously with the filing, we have a clear pattern of financial misconduct. In Illinois, that affects the entire framework of equitable distribution. His attorney is going to discover in that conference room that his client has been operating on a set of assumptions about this estate that bear no relationship to reality." Lena was quiet for a moment. "Schedule the meeting," she said. Chapter 6. What the Room Learned. The conference took place on a Wednesday morning in October. The offices of Marsh & Associates occupied a full floor in a building on LaSalle Street. The conference room had a long mahogany table and windows that looked north toward the river. Steel gray that morning, the light flat and focused. Garrett arrived first with Raymond Dells. Garrett wore his best suit. He sat at one end of the table with the body language of a man who expected to be accommodated. Raymond Dells had a yellow legal pad and a manner that communicated practiced efficiency. He had prepared for a negotiation involving a modestly wealthy woman and a logistics company with regional significance. He had not prepared for anything else because Garrett had not told him there was anything else to prepare for. Lena arrived at 9:10. She wore a gray blazer and dark trousers. No jewelry except a simple gold ring she wore on her right hand that had been her grandmother's. She carried nothing. She sat down across from Garrett without looking at him and folded her hands on the table. Howard Marsh entered behind her. He was 61 years old, compact, silver-haired, with a stillness that occupied the room the way expensive furniture occupies a room. Solidly, without requiring attention, making the space organize itself around it. He placed a leather portfolio on the table. He did not sit immediately. "Mr. Dells." He nodded. "I appreciate your time." Raymond Dells nodded back. He was already watching Howard's portfolio the way a man watches something that might contain bad news. "Before we discuss the terms of distribution," Howard said, sitting, "there are some foundational matters regarding asset classification that require clarification. Some of what your client has disclosed does not reflect the complete picture of this estate structure." Raymond Dells set his pen against his pad. "Go ahead." Howard opened the portfolio. He placed a single document on the table. "The marital residence," he said, "located at 412 West Chestnut, which Mr. Voss has listed in his petition as jointly owned marital property. It is not jointly owned." It is held in a family trust established in 2009, 6 years prior to the marriage. Mr. Voss's name does not appear on the title, the deed, or any documentation associated with the property. He has occupied the residence during the marriage as a beneficiary of the trust's hospitality provisions. He has no legal claim to the property. Raymond Dells wrote something on his pad. Garrett's expression did not change immediately, but his posture shifted. A small compression in the shoulders that Lena noticed and filed without reaction. The joint savings account, Howard continued. Mr. Voss transferred $87,000 from this account on the morning of October 3rd, concurrent with the filing of his divorce petition. This transfer was not authorized by Mrs. Voss and occurred after Mr. Voss had been consulting with divorce counsel for a period of not less than 7 weeks. Under Illinois law, the concurrent timing of the transfer with the petition filing establishes clear evidence of dissipation of marital assets. We have logged the transfer, the timestamp, and documentation of the prior legal consultations, which were not disclosed to Mrs. Voss. Raymond Dells stopped writing. He looked at his client. Garrett was looking at the document Howard had placed on the table. Howard placed a second document on the table. Now, regarding the broader estate of the Whitmore family, which Mr. Voss appears to believe consists of a mid-sized regional logistics company and related personal holdings, he looked at Garrett directly. I need to correct the asset picture your client has been working from. He placed a third document on the table. A summary sheet. 1 page clean. Whitmore Logistics Group, as of its most recent annual valuation, is worth approximately $260 million. It is held entirely within the Whitmore Family Trust, which was established in 1991, and has never had any connection to marital assets. The commercial real estate portfolio held by the trust represents a further $42 million. The investment accounts and liquid holdings add another $78 million. The total estate, conservatively stated, is approximately $380 million. He set the document down. None of it, he said, is subject to equitable distribution in these proceedings. The trust predates the marriage by decades. Its assets have not been commingled with marital funds at any point. Under Illinois law, trust property held prior to and independent of the marriage is not marital property. The room was very quiet. Raymond Dells was staring at the document. His face was doing the particular arithmetic of a professional who has just discovered that his client withheld the one piece of information that determined the entire shape of the case. His pen was resting against his pad without moving. Garrett was staring at Lena. She did not look at him. She was looking at a point slightly above the table's surface, her hands still folded, her expression the expression of someone who has been waiting for a meeting to end. 380, Garrett said. His voice came out differently than he intended. Flatter. 380 million. Lena looked at him then, just for a moment. 380, Howard confirmed, conservatively, a long silence. Furthermore, Howard said, given the documented financial misconduct, specifically the unauthorized transfer, the undisclosed divorce consultations, and a prior beneficiary alteration, on a joint insurance policy that we have also documented, Mrs. Voss will be filing a counterclaim for full recovery of dissipated assets plus consequential damages. Mr. Voss's financial exposure from the misconduct alone is estimated at not less than $220,000. Raymond Dells set his pen down entirely. He turned to Garrett and said quietly, I need to speak with you privately. Garrett didn't move. He was looking at Lena with an expression that had moved beyond calculation into something more raw, the expression of a man trying to find, in the face of the person across from him, some evidence that the world he thought he understood had not just ceased to exist. You knew, he said. His voice was low. Lena looked at him steadily, the whole time. She held his gaze for 3 seconds. When she spoke, her voice was the same voice she had used across 4 years of dinner tables and morning conversations, and late nights when he had come home from wherever he had been, and she had asked about his day, and listened to the answer, and not said the thing she was thinking. I knew, she said. I knew about Cassidy. I knew about Raymond Dells. I knew about the account transfer before the ink was dry on the petition. I knew about the insurance policy. I knew about the flowers and the hotel, and every dinner you charged to the card and told me was a client. She paused. My mother knew before I did. She spent the last 2 years making sure that when you showed me exactly who you were, there would be nothing left for you to take. Not the house, not the money, not a single thing my grandmother or my mother or I built. She stood. She picked up the small leather folder she'd set beside her chair. You walked into my mother's retirement party with the woman you'd been seeing for 7 months, and you stood in the home my mother built, and you held her hand in front of everyone who watched my mother build it, and you thought you were watching me have no idea what to do." She pushed her chair in. "I knew exactly what to do," she said. "I've known since the Tuesday morning I sat at our kitchen table and found a $64 florist charge and understood in 30 seconds what it meant." She walked toward the door. Howard Marsh collected his documents with the unhurried efficiency of a man who had concluded a meeting that had gone exactly as planned. At the door, Lena stopped. She spoke without turning around. "The residence will be accessible for you to retrieve your belongings on Saturday between 10 and 2. A list of what is and isn't yours has been prepared by Howard's office and will be sent to your attorney today. The joint accounts are frozen pending resolution of the dissipation claim." She opened the door. "Take care of yourself, Garrett." The door closed. Chapter 7. The Weight Leaving. Garrett Voss's life contracted with the particular efficiency of a structure losing its internal support. The house was gone inside a week. His belongings, packed by a moving service Lena had arranged, arrived at Cassidy's apartment on a Friday afternoon, in boxes that were labeled and organized in a way that Cassidy later said made her feel obscurely uncomfortable, like the whole situation had been managed by someone who was no longer upset about it. Cassidy had been attracted to the version of Garrett that Garrett showed her. Confident, established, the man who knew people at restaurants and moved through the city as though it arranged itself for him. She had not understood that the arrangement had been someone else's doing, that the dinners had been funded by an account with a ceiling she never knew existed, that the easy way Garrett occupied space had been possible because someone else had cleared the space in advance, invisibly, for years, without the house, without the income from the firm, which placed him on administrative leave when the divorce filing triggered a mandatory disclosure review, and the dissipation claim appeared in the record. Without the social infrastructure Lena had maintained, without ever labeling it as maintenance, Garrett was significantly less than he had appeared. Cassidy was 31. She had options. The man sitting across from her at her kitchen table at 2 in the afternoon, staring at a laptop with a resume open on the screen, was not the option she had understood herself to be choosing. She told him on a Thursday. She was kind about it in the way that people are kind when they have made a decision that they know is not negotiable. She said she thought they wanted different things. She said she hoped he would be okay. She said she needed him to be out by the end of the month. Garrett sat in his car in her parking garage for 40 minutes. He had no house, no firm, no wife, no girlfriend, no money he could access without legal consequence. Every surface his life had rested on for 4 years had been removed, and beneath those surfaces there was nothing that belonged to him. There had never been anything. The substance had always been elsewhere. He had moved through a life that was held up by someone he had not once in 4 years thought to ask about. Chapter 8. What she became. 11 months after the divorce, Lena Whitmore accepted the position of chief executive of Whitmore Logistics Group. She had been serving on the board since the divorce was finalized, learning the operational architecture with the same systematic attention she had applied to everything else in her life. She did not rush. She was ready when she was ready, which was 11 months later. Her first act as CEO was to announce the Whitmore Foundation's Workforce Initiative, a program providing logistics industry training and certification to single parents re-entering the workforce after career gaps. June had started the foundation 20 years earlier. Lena expanded its mission and funding commitment, dedicating $15 million over the first 3 years. The Chicago Tribune ran a profile of her in March. The piece focused on the company's transition and the foundation's expansion. It was careful and factual and included, in the 4th paragraph, a description of Lena as having spent the years before her appointment living, in her words, as privately as I could manage. The piece did not mention Garrett by name. The company's annual leadership dinner was held in April at a venue downtown. Lena stood at the podium in a dark blazer, her grandmother's ring on her right hand, and spoke about the invisible work that keeps institutions standing. She spoke about the people who manage the infrastructure without receiving credit for the management. She spoke about what happens when those people stop. She spoke for 9 minutes. She did not raise her voice once. 3 weeks after the dinner, a photograph from the event appeared on the cover of a logistics industry trade publication. Lena at the podium, composed, precise, standing inside the authority she had always had and had finally stopped managing on behalf of someone else. Garrett saw it in a waiting room. He was at a staffing agency in the Loop, waiting to be seen by a consultant who would help him identify available positions. He had been out of work for 9 months. He had taken one contract role that lasted 6 weeks and paid poorly, and had ended without renewal. He had lost weight. His suit needed pressing. He was holding his phone in one hand and his resume in the other, and he looked up because the trade publication was on the table in front of him, and Lena's face was on the cover, and the headline read, "Whitmore's Quiet CEO builds what she was always building." He looked at the photograph for a long time. He thought about the woman he had married, the one who organized everything and said little, the one who paid the bills and managed the calendar and kept the household running, and never once asked him to notice any of it, the one he had cheated on because she was too steady to leave and too quiet to fight back. He had believed. The one whose mother's retirement party he had walked into with another woman, because he had decided it didn't matter, because Lena didn't matter. Not really, not in the way that required consideration. He thought about the conference room, the document on the table, the number, 380 million. He thought about how she had looked at him across that table. Not with anger, not with pain, with the expression of someone who had finished something that needed finishing. He set the magazine down. He picked up his resume. He looked at it for a moment. He was called in. Chapter 9. Saturday morning. On a Saturday in May, 10 months after the divorce was finalized, Lena Whitmore sat on the back porch of the Evanston house. The garden was fully in motion. Her mother had planted most of it over 20 years. Roses along the south wall, a kitchen herb bed near the steps, a Japanese maple near the far corner that had reached the top of the fence. She had a cup of coffee. The morning was cool, and birds moved through the yard with focused, unhurried energy. Her phone was on the table beside her. On it was the encrypted folder. 2 years of documentation. Florist receipts, hotel records, credit card timestamps, calendar inconsistencies, screenshots of transfer records. The complete record assembled with the patience of a woman who had understood, from the moment she found that first $64 charge, exactly what she was doing and exactly why. She opened it. She scrolled through slowly once, the way you walk through a house you've lived in for a long time before you leave it. Touching each room not because you've forgotten something, but because you want to make sure you're not carrying anything you no longer need. She selected the folder. She pressed delete. The phone asked her to confirm. She confirmed. The screen cleared. She set the phone down. She looked at the garden. She thought about her mother, who was 3 weeks into a retirement that looked, from the outside, exactly like working. Because June Whitmore's idea of resting was redesigning the foundation's grant criteria and consulting, twice a week, with the company's new CEO. She thought about what her mother had said at the conference room, after, in the elevator going down. June had been there. She had arrived quietly, sat in the back, and said nothing during the meeting. After, in the elevator, she had looked at Lena and said, "Your grandmother would have liked how you did that." Lena had held that sentence for 10 months. She thought about the things she had managed for 4 years without acknowledgement. The schedules, the accounts, the social calendar, the maintenance coordination, the emotional labor of tracking another person's needs and meeting them without being asked and without being thanked. She had done it because she was organized and because she was good at it, and because, for a time, she had believed it was the architecture of a shared life. She had not understood until late that she was building a structure for someone who would never ask how it stood up. She had stopped building it, and the structure had collapsed, because it was hers. This was not a lesson she was bitter about. Bitterness was a form of continued attention, and she had redirected her attention. It was simply a fact, the way a physics principle is a fact. If you withdraw the load-bearing element, the thing it was bearing does not stand. She had withdrawn. Physics had done the rest. She finished her coffee. She stood. She walked inside the house and set her mug in the sink and looked out the kitchen window at the garden, at the Japanese maple her mother had planted when Lena was 9 years old, at the roses that had come back every spring, regardless of the winter. She looked at her grandmother's ring on her right hand, simple gold, worn smooth on the inside from 60 years of being worn. Her grandmother had built a small jewelry business from scratch in the 1960s, in a city that was not particularly interested in what she was building. She had built it anyway. She had left the ring to Lena's mother, and Lena's mother had left it to Lena on the morning of the conference, pressed into her palm in the parking garage with no explanation, because no explanation was necessary. Lena was not angry. Anger had been useful when it needed to be, and had retired when its usefulness was finished. She was not sad in the way she had expected to be sad. Grief came in specific moments, the particular grief of a marriage that had never quite been the marriage she thought she was in, and she let it arrive and she let it pass. What she was, standing in the kitchen of the house her mother had kept, and she had inherited, and she would continue to keep, was clear. Clear in the way that space becomes clear when you remove the thing that was obscuring it. She had spent 4 years managing a life for someone who did not see her managing it, who had looked at her steadiness and seen passivity, who had looked at her organization and seen servitude, who had looked at her silence and seen absence. She had not been absent. She had been present in every room, every account, every decision, every quiet morning. And in the end, it was her presence that had shaped everything, including the shape of his exit. The quiet woman is not the woman who has nothing to say. She is the woman who has understood, at a cellular level, that the right words delivered at the right moment in the right room are worth more than a lifetime of noise. Lena Whitmore had waited for the right room. She had found it. She had said what needed to be said, and then she had walked out and let the door close behind her and not looked back. She started a second cup of coffee. She looked at the calendar on the wall. Monday was a full day. Operations review, board prep, a call with the foundation's new program director. She was ready for all of it. She had been ready for all of it for longer than anyone had thought to notice. That was always the point.